Hello and welcome to Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association's Reasonable Doubt. My name is Murray Newman, and many years ago I used to co-host this show with some guy named Todd DuPont. For some reason, JV wanted me to sit in his chair tonight, and so I'm technically the host, but with me, as always, in the rightful seat is Julio JV Vela.
Well, Mr. President, this seat feels just fine. I'm very excited to be here.
If the glare's coming off my head, too bad. We might have to switch in mid episode here.
It's perfect.
We also have, as always, our friend Justin Harris, who is busy composing his next #1 hit. Good to see you, Justin.
Hey, Murray. Like Throwback Thursday.
Yeah. It hadn't been that long since we were here together, and we have a special guest tonight. Everybody who knows her loves her. Former prosecutor in multiple counties and noted defense attorney Lauren Byrne, the current reigning co-attorney of the year, Percy Foreman award-winning attorney of the year from the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Have you ever been on before?
I have never been on.
Well, I'm so excited.
Oh, wow.
This was kind of I was just talking to her and a group of our friends, and I said, come on, and she said, okay. So that's what you got to love about, Byrne. Here she is. And her home was a wreck. She cleaned it up all within the space of like 15 minutes to be on the show. She's amazing.
I'm ready.
So,
I don't think you were supposed to tell people that, Murray.
No,
that was like pre-show banter.
No, she is amazing. Byrne is amazing, and she's here to tell us about a recent case. And we can also talk about that little case that got her award. But we're gonna come back to that in just a second. But JV, I hadn't been on in a while. Loop me in. What's been going on, man?
Well, courthouse politics as usual. Big cases going in and out. We have the Armstrong case that just kind of wrapped up. We have the elections that are going
through. For the third time.
Yeah.
For the third time. We have some movements around the DA office, some things that are coming. We have Paxton all over the news. It's hot right now.
Yeah, it's there's been a lot. You know, I was thinking about it. I got sworn in as president on May 11th, and it's only been 3 months. It seems like it's been 4 years.
It legitimately feels like it's been a lot longer than you said 4 months or
3.
Oh my God! No way! It feels
there's been a lot that's been going on, but we have a rare opportunity because we do have Lauren Byrne on today, and Lauren, one of the big things that's going on at the courthouse right now is that we have a contested DA's race, and so far the formal race isn't until November of 2024. I'm not sure, Byrne, when's the primary? Is it in March? The Democratic
primary is going to be in March 2024, I think.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so thus far, there's not been a Republican candidate that's announced. Incumbent Kim Ogg has announced that she is seeking re-election, and one of her former top lieutenants, Sean Tier, left the office several months ago and has announced that he's running against her. And so right now, those two are the only two in the race so far, and that competition for that office kind of played into a case that got some media attention that Lauren recently handled. So we've asked Lauren to come on the show and tell us a little bit about that case.
Sure. So we had a client, Mansoor Abbasi. He was charged with failure to stop and render aid. It was out of the 339th District Court. It was being handled by the Vehicular Crimes Division, and Sean Tier was actually the call-out prosecutor who made the scene, as they often do on vehicular fatalities. And he initially had accepted the charges, and then somebody within his division was handling the case. Briefly, when the case was filed, there wasn't an autopsy report yet. Nobody reviewed the surveillance video or any of those things, as they rarely do before the charges are actually filed. But upon getting the evidence pretty early on, it became clear that this appeared to be a suicide. And if you listen to the officers on the body-worn camera, it was incredibly dark out there. A witness who had stopped said he didn't even know it was a human, that he thought it was a bag that flew up in the air.
So
our client gave a statement to police, and he said, he knew he had hit something. He doesn't even remember stopping and getting out, but the witness said he did stop and get out, and you see him on the video far down, stopping the car, getting out. It was so dark you couldn't see anything. You couldn't even see what happened to the body as soon as there was impact.
Where was the location of it?
It was on Highway 6, before Westheimer, like if you're coming from
Sure.
I-10, but before you hit Westheimer, and it was in a stretch that was very dark.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, on the surveillance video, you didn't even know that there was a person walking down the median, except there happened to be a very brief second of a light that caught him and outlined him, and you see him step out and turn into the oncoming traffic right in front of my client's car.
So it's an auto pedestrian.
Auto pedestrian. My client had some health issues. Classic symptoms of, shock and stress, went straight home to get his heart medication. When the police called, he ends up talking to them, providing a statement. No blood or anything on his car that would be indicative that he hit a living thing. And of course, HPD had never complied with the medical examiner's request for if they had any video. And once I provided it to the medical examiner, because I was very surprised by the initial cause of death of just vehicular accident, they reviewed it and changed it to suicide because it was pretty obvious from the video.
He had stepped in front of the car.
What is this video?
It's a video from a business down the road. It's very much from a distance, so it's not super close, but you can see the guy step out into the roadway because I don't know what it was, but something illuminated him briefly in that moment, and you could see him suddenly.
So it's surveillance footage from a business.
Surveillance video from a business a little bit.
Catches it like in the back row.
Yes.
How'd you? You have to move pretty quick to get that footage. A lot of those places don't keep it very long.
Well, the officers actually collected it, and it got handed over in discovery. But the medical examiner had requested any of that information and never got a response from HPD.
So did they issue an initial autopsy report and then change it after they saw the footage?
The initial report was accident. I set up a meeting with the medical examiner and gave him the video, and they counseled over it and then issued an amended report.
I believe there's for Harris County, at least I think there's only like 4 determinations that conclusions they can make. I think one is homicide, one is accident, one is suicide, and I think there's
undetermined or natural.
Something else. Yeah. Wow.
So we thought, there were certainly some good defenses, and it was also an interesting circumstance, that it was a suicide. Not that that's necessarily a defense, but it's certainly an interesting take. The legislative intent behind that law was if you're drunk and you manage to get away with killing somebody and they don't catch you in time to test you, they wanted the punishment range to be the same as an intox manslaughter. But this was a guy coming home from work on a Sunday night after having closed his business. Out of nowhere, really dark area of the road, somebody steps out and he's in complete shock and, doesn't see anything. The witness even says that they thought it was a bag that flew in the air.
Right.
He was charged. It was presented to the grand jury, and I'm not going to name names, but I think the initial prosecutor handling it thought that it would be no billed and was very surprised when it wasn't, and recommended to Sean at that time that it either be dismissed or a PTI or something to move the case along and in fairness based on all of the circumstances. However, as it was going on and we got to that point, Chip Lewis and I were in a death capital in Lubbock. So there was a significant period of time where we were no longer able to make court appearances and the case was just having to be reset. We had been talking to Sean Tier about a potential PTI prior to going to Lubbock. So those conversations were already happening. But there was a significant delay because of this trial. And it happened to be that our trial did not end until the same week as Sean's last week in the office. And so at that time, Judge Bell, who had been very patient with the resets, she said she wanted the documentation for any agreement that we were going to have. And so Sean, literally on his last day in the office, whipped out the PTI agreement. We got it executed and emailed it to the court so that they had it. At that point, he already knew he was leaving. The discussions obviously had started in, as far back as October or November the previous year. And so then, of course, while we're sitting there waiting for our jury to come back with a verdict on this case in Lubbock, we hear that things are blowing up in the 339th because somebody else has claimed that we were getting this PTI, and it blew up from there. We ended up having to have a hearing in front of Judge Bell because the DA's office filed a motion saying that there wasn't an agreement at all. I don't know if Murray, if you want to get into the whole mess with Carson going to court or not, but
I remember that.
Well, no, but I think it is kind of important to bring up at this point that that Sean's departure from the DA's office was like the worst kept secret in the building. Like everybody knew it. There were rumors that he was going to leave and run against Kim, and apparently he just has a bunch of motor mouth friends that that it got out there. And so this was one of those things that everybody kind of knew that they were going to be political enemies at any moment, the second that he actually turned in his notice.
As soon as he turned in his notice, and then he did an interview basically saying he wanted to be the DA without formally announcing. I mean, it was on.
Yeah.
And so at that point, they're looking for anything that they can try and claim, or use against Sean, in my opinion. And when they caught wind of this PTI, that's when they said, oh, no, we don't have an agreement. We had to have a full-blown hearing in front of Judge Bell, who said, no, actually, there is an agreement. There was an executed contract. I know there's a whole narrative out there that we tried to amend it. That's not what happened. The executed contract that Sean had emailed us with no changes had been executed by the client, all the attorneys, including the state, and sent to the court. We just weren't physically present to be in court with our client to formally enter into it. When Judge Bell ruled that there was a contract, they executed the boilerplate in the PTI contract that they can revoke this contract at all for any reason or no reason at all.
Anytime it's not subject to judicial or administrative review.
Sure. And at that point, they were putting out there that this was a sweetheart deal Sean had made in his last week of office, and he was running out the door and whipped out this contract. And the judge even said that she recalled conversations at the bench about how there was discussion of this PTI back in November and December at the bench. So this wasn't something that was hey, I'm walking out the door, let me give you this deal. In fact,
like a Devin Anderson, Tony Busby kind of deal. Sure.
We had contemplated this a while back. We just weren't physically there to get, write him and get the contract and get it entered into. When the judge said she wanted the paperwork, I said, we better get it right now. And oh darn, it's also Sean's last week. We need to get this now. The judge wants the paperwork. We got to get it in. And in fact, I'm sure at that point, he really had put in his notice. He knew he was going to run. He didn't have to whip out the paperwork if he didn't want to. He knew that they would probably try and throw him under the bus for this. But he did it because it was the right thing to do in the case, given the circumstances known at the time.
Well, and there's a couple things going on there. I've worked enough cases where when I get wind that a prosecutor is going to be moving out of a court in a case that I wanted, it's not even a special crime, special division, but just a trial bureau. I run off. I'm like, hey, that thing we've been talking about, let's just get this done now. Right. And sometimes you find prosecutors who are like, you know what, let's do that because I don't want to leave this for the next person.
You know what?
It can seem nefarious from the outside, like it's a last-minute sweetheart deal. But a last-minute sweetheart deal is like what Devin Anderson did for Tony Busby when she walked into court and signed a dismissal on a one-day pretrial intervention that all of our clients have to do 6 months to a year on.
Sean did.
And-
Sure.
Sean did that office a favor, because if you get Lauren,
Sure.
Chip,
Well, yeah.
on those facts, they're going to eat, and I guarantee you it ain't going to be Mitchum trying that case. And it's, I mean, come on. With
Well,
those, he
right.
did a favor.
And to speak to one of the things that Justin brought up, that one of those reasons that we get kind of desperate to, like, when someone's about to leave and they've been handling that case, is because it literally, you go back to square one when you get a new prosecutor on it. They don't know it. They've got to read it. They've got to talk to the family. They've got to look at all the evidence. And it can literally, you could be this close to having a resolution on your case, and all of a sudden you just took it back 6 months, a year, even 2 years, because these folks don't know the case. And so there's absolutely an interest of justice in trying to dispose of a case with a prosecutor who's knowledgeable about it.
Who took Sean's spot?
Well, there is still not, there's an acting division chief now, but at the time, Lynn Wynn was going to be, I guess, sort of acting over the division since she was the chief under Sean. They hadn't named a division chief replacement at that point. There had been a prosecutor in the division actually assigned to the case, but we had gone through 4 prosecutors, and that's why we started dealing directly with Sean.
Yeah.
Because we knew that they couldn't authorize a dismissal or a PTI, and with the constant changes, we just started talking to Sean. And I even told the prosecutor, the last prosecutor handled it, you don't even have to worry about this one. We're talking to Sean. You go try your cases. She was in trial all the time. Like, we got this one. This is one that he'll handle. Take off your plate. I'm sure she's going to have to do some to-dos or whatever, but not to worry about it. So they revoked the PTI and offered us 10 years in prison, or a PSI, which I certainly respect and trust Judge Bell, but we had just told our client he had a PTI and he had filled out the paperwork.
Right.
And we had, done all these things. It was jarring, to say the least. And very much centered around Sean. I mean, they say it in the motion that they filed in the court. They try to claim he was unauthorized to make any of those offers, which doesn't really matter for court purposes. If a prosecutor makes an offer, they make an offer. I don't care if the DA handbook or Kim Ogg says, oh, I don't let them do that. That doesn't matter to us. It just got ugly. Vivian King actually subpoenaed her own prosecutors, several of them, to testify, which was a very uncomfortable situation because nobody wanted it to have to get that far. And to Judge Bell's credit, she actually said, we don't need testimony. I've looked at it. This is a contract. If you want to give me some legal arguments as to why it's not an executed contract, I'll listen. But we don't need the dog and pony show of all these witnesses about did somebody break an internal, whatever. So then we were stuck, and we now have a 10-year offer on a case. And the office decided, rather than having plenty of prosecutors in their vehicular crimes division, including Lynn Wynn, who has tried plenty of these cases, handle the case, they hired Warren DeProm as a special prosecutor and entered into a contract with him for $175 an hour to handle the case out of DA discretionary funds.
And so for those who don't know, who's Warren DeProm?
So Warren is he still does some prosecuting, but he was a prosecutor for a long time at the Harris County District Attorney's Office, in the vehicular division for quite some time. He then went over to Montgomery County for a while, and then Waller County as the first assistant. While in Waller County, they have a small enough county to where he was allowed to conduct defense type business or expert business outside of Waller County. So he also started at the same time doing work as a defense expert and defense in some other cases. He retired from Waller County. He's had enough years through the county system to retire. And so he now has this gig where he's hired as a special prosecutor. So he's doing some cases for Waller. He's got some Montgomery County cases. He's got at least 2 in Harris. And he also does defense work and expert work.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Kind of interesting.
It's pretty cool. I mean, that's cool. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't know.
It is, but
That's cool.
I think it's an interesting loophole around the whole law change about special prosecutors. How
Sure.
they're now supposed to be
One county
Yeah.
away or something.
a contiguous county.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, it kind of sucks. Just like, defense attorneys, you should charge flat fees for, charged cases, because you don't necessarily want to pay your prosecutor by the hour to work on your
Right.
case.
Right.
You
You don't want to incentivize
You're
them.
motivated to drag it out or
Right.
take it to trial.
Well, and that's actually, but you know what? That's actually one of the reasons that they did get rid of that, because after Kim took over and she fired a lot of experienced prosecutors, and then she had a lot of conflicts because she hired a lot of defense bar members. She was bringing in, well, she wasn't. The judges were bringing in prosecutors who had just gotten fired by her, and they were getting to bill hourly on death capitals, and at some point, death penalty opponents said, are these folks, they're getting paid by the hour and they're going to work more hours if it's a death penalty case. Are they seeking death to make it more profitable for them? And I remember being interviewed on that, and I was like, there are some aggressive prosecutors, but that may be stretching it a little bit. But that's one of the reasons they got rid of it. So.
And, I'm sure some people have heard tales, but I think Warren has always had a reputation as a pretty aggressive prosecutor that certainly dances the line on some of his charging decisions and things like that. What a lot of people might chalk up to as accidents.
He's always
prosecute.
Yeah, Warren has always courted controversy. He was my chief for a while.
He's before my time also.
Well, no, he was my boss there for a while, and he likes publicity. He likes the headlines. He was my chief when I was a brand new two in Ted Poe's court, and he had made an agreement with the BBC or some British documentary company where they were going to basically film a death penalty case, including deliberations. And he and Ted Poe had agreed to this. They'd already outrigged the whole 228th at the time, and as it turned out, he had not checked with the upper echelon of the DA's office. When they found out you've agreed to what now, they shut it down, and Poe was not happy, Warren was not happy, but no, he's always pushed the envelope. Some say way past the line in getting some headlines for himself and being the world's most aggressive prosecutor. And his claim to fame is these DWI fatality cases, anything involving a vehicle. Which, not that there was alcohol involved in this one, but he was kind of that. I guess that genre that for some reason Kim decided that case he a little Warren to prom instead of her entire VATS unit. But
so Warren came in and immediately re-indicted the case with a deadly weapon paragraph. Started. He didn't like, I guess, HPD's take on the case, so he got money from the DA's office to hire a retired reconstructionist police officer from a different agency to do a reconstruction without the vehicle and without the ability to be at the scene as it was or any of those things. He just watched the grainy surveillance video and did a reconstruction. At one point, Warren wanted to do a consumption order for DNA testing on some of the evidence. And I said, why? I mean, my guy admits to driving. Why do you know he was driving? And he goes, don't worry, if it takes too long with the DNA lab, which we know is a huge problem, I'll just outsource it to a different lab. So he had what seemed like unlimited amount of funds to pour into this case that we really could use on homicides and capital murders and sex assaults and all these cases in this county where we're waiting on those things. It seemed to be a non-issue in our case.
But that was because Sean Tier hadn't made an offer on all those other cases.
Sure. So this goes on, and Warren's, dotting every I, crossing every T, and then some, because, he's getting paid by the hour to do so. And we get to the point where we've got to do something on the case. And at this point, it's already made the news because the DA's office has gone and commented after the hearing in court about how Sean Tier did this, Sean Tier did that, we've revoked this plea, this isn't justice. They, in a filing, put like a sheet with my client's email, his phone number, all of this stuff is an exhibit, just everything you can think of. got an affidavit from this poor kid's mom, and put it in the record, all kinds of things. And the mom could not accept that it was a suicide, despite plenty of evidence to the buildup before this night that he was suicidal. And I don't begrudge her that. I can't imagine. But they're dragging her up in her wheelchair to court for every setting, even though we're not doing any. I mean, it was just a mess.
The elevator talk was big. It was big.
Oh yeah, and they were outright commenting all these things that even the judge was like, no, I've known about this plea talk since whenever. This is not a last minute thing. It did not matter to them. Their filings were completely contrary to the DIM summary. They basically tell a great tale in their filings. It was their own narrative there because of Sean. Their focus was Sean. Of course, our guy's the collateral damage. And may I say the complainant's family was a collateral damage here too, to drag that mom through that.
Right.
So we finally get to the point of disposition, and Warren said, I agree that maybe a deferred is appropriate. If you go to trial, I'm going to ask the jury for prison time. I put the deadly weapon paragraph on there, so probation isn't an option from the judge. Here's his offer. His offer was a 10-year deferred with, fine, community service, erect a marker at the scene of the accident and maintain it over the term of the probation, like a memorial marker. Pay for the funeral expenses, 3 days in jail on the anniversary of the death every year. If you're doing well, he wouldn't put this in writing, but if you're doing well on probation, we'll consider telling the judge we don't need the jail time anymore. All that kind of stuff. So we, here's the deal. Without getting into,
can I ask how is he overcoming the ME report and the video? Like, what are those conversations with him like?
He believed that it wasn't suicide because the mom said she didn't think he was suicidal, despite the HCPC records, military record, all kinds of stuff. No, we've talked to some of his friends that night that seemed that he was okay, which of course nobody had ever talked to before. Okay, well, do you have any notes from those meetings? I'm telling you what they said. That's my work product. I cannot give you the notes from the meeting.
That's so awesome. That's incredible.
He then
Well, and I've had several friends who've taken their own lives, and people who are with them just moments before were like, oh my, we were partying. Like, we were out for the 4th of July, like having a great time. Like,
not only that, this was documented stuff where he, I won't divulge too much, but there was a ton of documentation, over 700 pages from county, from within the county and other things where this kid had a lot of issues. His funeral was online. I heard the comments of people in his life. I mean, there was no question that this kid suffered. Okay.
Right.
But the mom didn't believe it. And so Warren was he couldn't outright say that the medical examiner, because by this point, the one medical examiner had left and another one had reviewed it and ruled the same way. He didn't want to outright say they're wrong, because that would be a big Brady disclosure on every case they're on if we're saying they just made the wrong ruling. But he, through his reconstructionist, tried to opine that my client could see what he hit before he hit it. Even I have no idea how he could say that. And so he just felt it was a very strong case in guilt innocent. And he was ready to try it, or we could do this 10-year deferred.
And it was filed as an FSRA, so it wasn't saying he was at fault for the accident. Yeah, it wasn't like it's an intox or
so 2 to 20.
Yeah, it was
2 to 20.
But FSRA is failure to stop and render aid.
Right.
Yes.
Which means like a hit and run where someone's injured.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Who's at fault for the accident?
That would be a 3rd degree. With a death involved, it's a 2nd degree.
Yeah.
So
those are the hard statutes to find, right? They're not in the penal code.
Well,
they're
it's
like buried in the.
Those are real tricky, because you like to read them as ors. So it's like there's like four of them in the FSRA statute, and I want to read them as ors. The law says you're supposed to read them as they are ors. You want to read them as ands. So it's like leave the scene or immediately return but it's or. Anyways,
Sure.
It's pretty tricky. So and then what happened?
Well, so without getting into, conversations with the client, if you were suddenly thrust into the media and the DA's office has decided to make your case a shining example because they're in a DA's race with the previous person that handled it, and they're telling you they're asking for prison time and they want to go to trial on your case and they're paying somebody by the hour, you might be very nervous to go to trial. Sure. And you might want to, take a deferred if you know you're going to avoid going to prison because, you're scared.
Yeah.
I'll just say that, we were very eager to try the case, but that wasn't necessarily our decision. And so very begrudgingly, our client wanted to plea. So he did, and Warren graciously lowered it to 8 years deferred. But here's where it got really bizarre. So Warren sent us the plea paperwork, and I had asked him, I said, will you put in there, the part about you'll not ask for jail time after a year or two, depending. He goes, no, I'm not going to write that in there. I'll tell the judge. Okay, whatever. Will you change it to 8? Oh, at first, he didn't even want to change it on the paperwork to 8. He was like, I'll just tell the judge. So he clearly, if they were going to offer a deferred, they wanted it to be the biggest, baddest deferred ever so they could try and spin this somehow.
In writing, yeah.
So then he goes, okay, you know what? I'll change it to the 8, given he kind of slipped up because given the statement in the plea paperwork. I go, what? And I went back and looked. He had edited the paperwork. That boilerplate section, the standard paperwork where it talks about the part, if you accept this plea, it's binding on, the court accepts the plea, it's binding on the court, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. He had written in a statement on behalf of our client saying, I won't read the whole thing because it's pretty lengthy, but basically, I'm very sorry. I'm a family man. If this happened to me, I'd be devastated. I knew I hit a person and I was scared given my culture and how things are in my homeland, Iran. I'm so sorry to the mother. Yep. I now know what a close relationship the mother and son had. It was this whole thing.
Warren wrote this speaking for the defendant he was prosecuting.
You
didn't mishear that.
Propose declarations or something?
Look at Justin's face. It's like, yes, you did hear that right. Like, yeah.
And talking about the culture and stuff. And so I said, absolutely not. I go, and at this point, we're in the courtroom.
What is your client's culture?
Let him finish. I want to hear what happens.
He's originally from the Middle East, and so Warren presumed that must be the culture that he was too scared because in his homeland, he would have been killed or something for something like this.
Because there's other cultures that condone. Okay.
I don't know.
Warren being from South Africa, he has a deeper understanding of the Middle East.
No, I'm kidding. I didn't mean to say that.
Okay.
So I walk out of the courtroom and I said, you slipped this in here. We're not signing this. Like, this is blowing everything up. And that's the only time he even gave an inch. He goes, I'll take it out. I'll go ahead and take it out. But I've already read it to the complainant's mother, and she was very pleased with his statement. And I go, but it's not his statement, Warren.
It's yours.
And so he takes it out. And then he says, how about I put it in a Word document and have your client sign it? That can be his letter of apology, since I've already feel like I'm being very kind to your client for writing his letter. And I've read it to the mother. I was like, again, it's not his letter. Like, no. He wanted this guy to say everything that he knew we were going to contest in the trial.
Well,
I think he wanted to be able to, Kim wanted to be able to.
No, well, here's the problem. If he doesn't get this guy to plea or figure out how to execute this, they're going to get their butt whooped at trial. He's going to get his butt whooped at trial and have to justify the reason that he decided to bill the county or whoever he's getting paid for these kind of things. This is my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, and so eventually the plea goes through, and it is what it is. It's not my decision at the end of the day. David Mitchum was up in court the whole time with other people from the DA's office, all their media people. They had called the news. There were cameras set up for this plea. They immediately go to do a press conference, and it's all about Sean. And how Sean had exercised poor judgment, and Sean had given a false narrative to the media when he talked about the difficulty of the case. And then Warren goes on to say, oh, Chip Lewis and Lauren Byrne wouldn't have pled this client if they didn't know it was a strong case, and da 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 da. And then Mitchum kept going on and on and on about Sean Tier and how this was a sweetheart deal, and he has proof in writing that he's happy to give them copies of. He gave them like 1-page email from a middle of an email chain that isn't even from Sean, that this whole thing was about looking for something to use in this election to try and slam Sean. They thought they had it in this case. And now my client is on an 8-year deferred because he's too scared to go to trial. And I don't blame him for being scared. When they're willing to go to these links and slip this kind of stuff in and not hand over notes from witnesses. I mean, he outright just wouldn't do it. And Lynn Wynn, to her credit, said, I don't care. She can have all my witness notes. And Warren goes, oh, no.
No,
he goes, ask Lynn. Lynn said, fine. He goes, oh, no, still no.
Well, and the thing is that I think that this is the latest and most egregious one in a long time of just how politicized that office is. You know, as Lauren mentioned, you know, they have just this entourage that follows around these cases when it's going to be positive press for the office. And you have John Donnelly, used to be on Fox 26. He's usually the first person in there. He's the boots on the ground guy who's there to generate positive publicity. But in this one, they send up David Mitchum to not really talk about the case, but to slam Sean Tier. It's like, yeah, sorry for this lady's loss and this guy being on defer, but let's talk about Tier, the real issue here. And this was, to me, just the most shameless use of DA resources to slam a political opponent of Kim Ogg. And when, you know, Byrne and I are friends, and we have mutual friends, and we talk all the time. And when Byrne was telling us about what happened that morning, we were incredulous. And we don't necessarily have the highest opinion of the upper admin at the DA's office, but even for them, it was kind of a jaw-dropping moment, the lengths that they had gone to just to get at Sean Tier.
Well, there's something that's called in media, it's called the magic box. And what the magic box does is it distracts or causes the media or to divert people's attention to something else that's going on, right, not what actually is happening. And so this very well may be the magic box right in front of us. Now, if I may, we're getting all kinds of buzz on the live wire. Apparently, the individual who is accused of shooting at least one officer
last night
is has barricaded his home into his house in Houston currently, or Harrison surrounding counties, and has shot or alleged to have shot at least 1 to 2 other officers. And now the FBI and some federal agencies are involved and have just stormed the house. This is happening. Two
officers shot tonight.
Okay, so let's talk about this magic box and how the district attorney's office can use this case to champion their causes and such. We have the premier death penalty lawyer here to talk about these things. It's true. So
she has saved the life of 100% of her clients that they've ever sought death on. 100%.
And I will.
My first trial as a defense attorney.
Yeah.
I think I can maybe name how many like 4 people, or 3 people in the state of Texas who can actually say something like that.
And she did it in Lubbock.
So I know in Lubbock.
Crazy.
So let me ask you this. Okay, we have at least one officer shot. We have alleged to have been shot, is shot, and at least 1 to 2 more who are shot. And is this an opportunity for Ogg to seek death, or is this a capital case?
No, they lived. No one died.
No one's died yet.
No, everyone's alive.
How? Okay. Is it still LWOP eligible, life without parole?
No, it's at best they'll file it as an ag assault on a public servant, 3 counts. which is a first degree, as you know. If they decide they want to make the charge sound sexier, they may say attempted capital murder, but that's stupid. It makes it more difficult.
If
to
any
prosecute.
officers do die, does that cross the threshold into a death capital?
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
I know Casey Kieran and Casey Garrett, I believe, are on at one of the open or death capitals in Harris County. I don't know how many that they're going. I heard that they were on one just through the courthouse today.
I don't.
How many death cases are open currently, or is AUG seeking? Are there any?
There's the mattress firm guy, where he's charged as a serial because he kind of goes on a spree and kills at least 3 people. That is still pending. My understanding is he's offered to plead to like 3 life sentences stacked, and they're holding firm on death. I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 more, at least currently, death cases. I mean, who knows if they could resolve for life without parole at some point, but there's not a lot.
Yeah.
In Harris County, we always hear about the Capital Committee. Who is a part of that, and can we talk about a little bit about that? Because I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
So now I left the office in May of 2020, so I don't think it's significantly changed, but there could be some changes. Kim Ogg is obviously supposed to be, the most important person in the room at the Capitol Committee, but she also she will vote alongside everybody else when she makes it to the meeting. She's very frequently not there due to other duties, other things. And not everybody comes every time, but it's Kim, Vivian, David Mitchum. There's several division chiefs that take turns going, like Samantha Connect, Caroline, Dozier, Cameron Callaghan, Mary McFadden.
Those are all heavies. Heavies.
Been around.
It's basically division chiefs and higher. Now there's some that are not necessarily in trial, like Josh Reese is over Ritz. He's not on the Capitol Committee. Things like that. The rule is you're supposed to have a quorum of those people because not everybody can make every meeting. They're supposed to be on Thursdays, and you can imagine there's conflicts. I have actually been in a meeting where we had voted for death, and Kim did not want to seek death. Her vote was against death, but she went with the decision because she was outvoted. That was very early on in her administration. Seeing how she's changed and witnessing it for myself, I don't know if it would be the same outcome today if she didn't want to seek death and the vote was otherwise.
Does she have overruling power? If let's say
I mean, sure, she does. She does. Absolutely. Most of the time, Mitchum or Vivian are there in her stead, and they'll just give her an update of the meeting. And if there's something big that she disagrees with, then she can handle it. So everything's kind of tentative on running it by her. But basically, and the chief who's handling the case has to go. They're the ones that present the case. So you go to the committee. You've already asked for any mitigation from the defense attorneys that they want to present to the committee. There's like a boilerplate outline of a report that you're supposed to fill out with the summary, the criminal history, the aggravating factors, any mitigating factors, your overall recommendation. And then there's a bunch of signature lines where everybody signs, and they'll say, okay, I think it should be LWOP. I think it should be death. I think we should offer 60 on murder or whatever. All of those things get documented, passed around for signatures. And then a copy or the original is kept with one of the admins on the 6th floor. So it's like an actual written report that is kept by the office that documents the decision from that meeting. And sometimes you revisit it, when things change or when the defense comes with an offer that you weren't expecting, as often happens right before, the jury's coming in. And so the offers can change, or they also make decisions on whether, somebody should be offered a deal, for a proffer if they want to cooperate, things like that. all of those things go to the committee.
Is there like a majority decision, or is it ultimately everybody just kind of puts their vote in and Kim Ogg makes her decision?
So when Kim first got in office, it appeared to be a majority decision. Like I said, there was one case I was present for where she did not think it was a death case, but and one other person agreed with her. Everybody else voted death, and so we initially were seeking death. That case ultimately pled, which was the right outcome. As time has gone on, just like chiefs were able to make murder recs initially when Kim came into office, as time has gone on, I don't think anybody's going to seek death without Kim's ultimate approval. Although, for the most part, she kind of goes with the room, but not always. One time I had a case where they wanted to plead to life without parole, and I thought it was appropriate because we were going to seek death. They wanted to plead to life without parole, and everybody in the room agreed except David Mitchum, because he had just given an interview to the news about cases that the office was seeking death on, and so he didn't want to allow him to plead because of that interview.
Once the state of let's assume a state of Texas and the district attorney signs off on, and they're going to seek death. At that point, when you'll go to trial, you'll see the jury. We bifurcated trial. Let's assume they find guilty. What are the in trial? Because you've been there and in Lubbock of all places. Tell us how it was knowing that because they've ultimately found him guilty, knowing that now you have to save this person's life.
So the interesting thing about the case in Lubbock is there was never, ever a question as to guilt. Our client was captured on the officer's body-worn camera in the booking area of the Lubbock Police Department, talking with the officer as he was being booked. They had unhandcuffed him and allowed him to go to the bathroom and never handcuffed him again. They're thinking college kid, drugs in dorm room, they just didn't recuff him. And they're sitting there for almost 30 minutes to an hour making small talk before he suddenly reaches into his pant leg, grabs the gun, shoots him straight in the head and runs. All in video, you could hear the conversation. He asked the officer if he has a family and children right before he shoots him in the head. There was never a question as to guilt, okay? So our client ultimately pled guilty to the jury.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there was no defense. There was no way to get a lesser. Keep credibility in front of the jury. No question it was a police officer. There wasn't any issue with competency, none of that stuff existed. We just didn't have it. The only thing is that he was, under the influence of Xanax. Although, it's really hard to tell with Xanax because people are talking like they're just fine.
Right.
They seem totally normal.
Right.
And we were not the first attorneys on the case. He actually had some very smart attorneys who on their own, the moment they got on the case within like 2 days of his arrest, got an ex parte or sealed ex parte motion to go in and get a lab person in from a private lab and immediately take samples. Because we never have that, right?
Right, yeah.
Never have that in cases. And so we at least had drug results that showed what was in his system, 2-3 days later. And he obviously didn't consume anything from the point of his arrest until the test. I say obviously, what's in the jail, but there's no reason to believe that he had gotten a hold of anything. So ultimately, we thought the best way for him to, save his life was to plead guilty. So we knew going in, and our whole focus was how do we save him in the penalty phase.
Right.
I can't imagine looking at the jurors in voir dire during your presentation. That must have been, usually I ask somebody on the witness stand, 1 to 10, like how scared were you? I don't know, for me it'd be like a 15.
I was terrified, I'll be honest. I left the DA's office in 2020, May 2020. I went to Fort Bend for a little while, and by November of 2020, I was doing defense work. But with COVID, nobody was going to trial. So I had not actually tried a case as a defense attorney. I mean, I've certainly tried cases as a prosecutor, but I hadn't been in that position, and I was terrified. I had Lisa Andrews with me. I had Chip with me, and we had local counsel Mark Snodgrass. I don't know if you're very involved in TDCAA, you know Mark.
Everybody knows Mark.
But of course I was petrified. I was like, I'm going to have to quit being a lawyer if I come try this as my first case as a defense attorney. And,
straight on the deep end. That's
already,
deep end.
Given the evidence and given the video, pretty good, and Lubbock, pretty good chance this is not going our way.
So what are there findings that the jury has to have in
Yes.
order for you to save someone's life, and what are they?
Sure. So once you get the guilty, there are two special issues that the jury has to consider. The first one is there a probability that the defendant is a future danger? So basically, they can consider the offense itself. They can consider anything else that they heard in either phase of the trial. And then they kind of have to look at, it's like a magic ball. Do we think that it is probable that he will be a future danger? Future danger is any sort of act of violence. It could be a criminal threat. It could be a physical assault in jail. It could be whatever the jury deems in their own minds as future danger. That there's basically a threat to society. And that society can be their prison society, because they're already going to be in prison for, the rest of their natural lives.
And guys, just so you know, we've got 4 minutes, so.
Okay.
Keep it up. Keep it up. Yeah.
You have to answer yes to move on. It takes, I think you have to be unanimous on that, or does it have to be 10 to move on? I think you have to be unanimous as to that. Either way, you move on to the next one, which is there mitigation, which again can be anything the jury sees as mitigation. Is there sufficient mitigation to warrant sparing their life, even though you believe them to be a future danger? Essentially, you have to get at least 10 people to say yes in order to spare their life. But what the jury is not allowed to be told is, if even one person disagrees and it's not unanimous, the jury hangs, it's automatically LWOP. But you're not allowed to tell the jury that.
Yeah. Wow.
Which sucks.
Yes.
Yeah, that really sucks.
And it had to have been part of your strategy going in that you would hope to hang it up, but that's not what happened.
Oh, we were hoping at best to hang it.
Yeah.
We ended up getting yes to future danger, which we did not think.
Wow.
If anything, we thought we had better evidence that he wouldn't be a future danger, but the defense almost always loses on the future danger question. And the fact that he killed an officer in a police station, I get it.
It's kind of dangerous.
We ended up getting 10 people yes on sufficient mitigation.
Gosh, you got 10?
I fell out. I
10?
was actually zooming in at that point because we were traveling back and forth from Lubbock, and they were out for, almost 3 days, or at least 2. I had flown home Friday night for childcare issues, and so I'm standing on my landing, and I thought, I'm going to fall down the stairs, and nobody's here.
Wow.
So I thought they were going to say no, and it was yes.
So Byrne is one of my dearest friends. We talk all the time, and we have a close group of friends, and we were all like on this journey with her, and we were all talking behind her back like, we don't know if she'll recover if they do that. She was even kind of, how we have our gallows humor. She was like, if 100% of my cases ended in execution as an offense.
Gosh.
So there was so much stress. We felt, as her friends, we were feeling the stress for her.
Yeah.
And
I was spinning out a little bit on text.
but it was the moment when when the Karate Kid drops Johnny, or when Rocky knocks out Apollo, like, oh, they did it.
Oh my God.
I'll say this. I think I'm not going to discount all the effort that we put into the case, because we did, but I also think that I liked the prosecutors up there we dealt with, but I think they thought, we have a video, it's Lubbock, it's what we need, and we far outworked them on the punishment phase, and even just in the details of the offense itself and establishing the timeline and the drug use.
Well, you had to, otherwise you would have lost.
Agreed, but I kept thinking throughout the trial, man, if I was trying this case, because I'm still in that mindset.
Yeah.
Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they pointing this out? Why aren't they? And it was finally Mark Snodgrass goes, Lauren, they're not going to try the case, and that's okay. They're not going to try it the way you think they ought to try it. Just and I was like, you're right. I mean, I shouldn't be rooting for that, but I think they did not prepare the way that they should have because they assumed it was in the bag given the video and the demographic.
All right. Well, we're at the 1 minute mark, and I think we're going to be told to wrap here in a second.
Our predictions. Oh, so we're on the live wire. It's coming in. So apparently there's like a battering armored bulldozer going.
I bet they're going to kill him. They're going to kill him.
And the house is on fire now. What court does it land in? Assuming he survives.
It's already in. It's in Deshaun Jones's.
Oh, snap!
So yeah.
If they survive, it'll attract to the 180th.
Yeah.
If not, it'll go in rotation. Hopefully they do, and it goes to the 180th.
All right.
That's huge.
All right, Lauren Byrne, thank you so much for coming on. You kept us.
Thanks for having me on the fly.
You were awesome. Great. Thank you very much. Justin Harris, you can get back to composing the next '1 hit.
I'm looking for number 2.
Number 2?
They still pay.
Yeah. You and Yanni, man. I think y'all could be the dream team. All right, JV, we got 30 seconds. Final thoughts, man.
I think a lot of things are brewing. I think it's going to be a lot of stories coming through. Elections, hot topics, U.S. president.
Let's talk more next time.
Love it.
All right. For everybody for tuning in, I'm Murray Newman. Thank you, JV, Justin, Lauren. We'll talk to y'all next time.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.